The crucible had fired. Shepard remembered that much. The blinding cascade of energy, the feeling of every atom being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, the last desperate hope that it would be enough. It had been enough. The Reapers fell. The galaxy exhaled. And then the universe decided that Shepard's story wasn't finished. The dimensional scar opened without warning above the ash world of Tharsis Secundus, a planet that had been dying for 3 centuries before the word-bearers finished the job. No auger array registered the anomaly. No navigator sensed the ripple in the warp. One moment, the sky was the color of old blood, choked with the smoke of a loyalist's last stand. And the next, something fell from it like a comet wrapped in blue biotic light, trailing quantum static and the ghost echoes of a war fought in a galaxy that had no name in any Imperial lexicon. Shepard hit the ground hard. The N7 armor absorbed the impact, mostly. Cerberus-grade plating, already scarred from 100 engagements, cracked along the left pauldron and sent a cascade of amber warnings scrolling across the HUD. The Omni-tool flickered, cycling through atmospheric readings it couldn't categorize. Biological signatures it had no database entries for, and a gravitational constant that was approximately, but not quite, correct. Everything here was approximately, but not quite correct. The air tasted like iron and incense and something older than both. The sky was wrong. The ruins stretched in every direction like broken teeth. Gothic architecture taken to megalomaniacal extremes. A cathedrals the size of space stations reduced to rubble by weapons that left glass where stone had been. Shepard stood, checked the Carnifex, checked the Matic, both functional. The biotic implants hummed at the base of the skull, but the hum was ragged, stuttering, like a VI running on corrupted code. Something in this atmosphere was pushing back against the mass effect fields, creating interference at the quantum level. The biotics would work, they just wouldn't behave. Classic. New galaxy, same problems, worse architecture. Across the ruins, something moved. Not the shambling, corrupted figures that littered the battlefield. Those had stopped moving when Shepard landed, as though the dimensional impact had carried enough residual energy to scatter whatever remained of them. No, this was disciplined movement. Heavy, coordinated. The distinctive magnetized clang of armored boots on shattered ferrocrete, moving in a pattern that any soldier would recognize. Flanking formation, overlapping fields of fire, no wasted motion. Whoever they were good. Shepard dropped into a crouch behind a shattered pillar, watching the silhouettes resolve through the smoke. And then the smoke cleared enough to reveal the scale of them. 3 meters of cobalt blue ceramite plate, storm bolters held with casual authority, helmets shaped like the faces of avenging angels. And Shepard made a tactical decision that had served well across 3 years of impossible wars. Don't shoot first, not yet. The lead figure stopped 10 meters away. The helmet tilted. Even through the armored faceplate, and the weight of that gaze was palpable, the focused attention of something ancient and lethal trying to categorize a threat it had never encountered. Unidentified combatant. The voice was amplified, precise, carrying the particular cadence of someone accustomed to being obeyed across the noise of artillery barrages. You are standing in the operational perimeter of the Ultramarines' 5th Company. Identify yourself or be classified as a hostile anomaly. Shepard straightened slowly, hands visible, the Carnifex holstered but not locked. Commander Shepard, N7 Systems Alliance. And I'm going to need someone to explain what's happened to my galaxy. The Ultramarines did not lower their weapons. This was, Shepard noted, a reasonable response. An unknown entity had fallen from a dimensional scar in the middle of an active war zone, survived terminal velocity impact, and was now standing in scorched N7 armor, speaking a dialect of Low Gothic that was simultaneously recognizable and architecturally wrong. Cleaner, less liturgical, stripped of the devotional suffixes that peppered every imperial sentence like mandatory punctuation. The figure before them was human in proportion, but carried themselves with the particular stillness of someone who had stared down apex predators and learned to become one. Captain Severin Dast of the 5th Company was not easily impressed. He had held the Cadian Gate against 3 demon incursions and personally executed a chaos sorcerer mid-ritual. He lowered his Stormbolter anyway, not because the stranger wasn't dangerous, because they weren't afraid, and in his experience, the beings that warranted true caution were never afraid. "Secure the perimeter," he ordered quietly. "Vox Primarch Guilliman, encrypted, priority Tertius." Shepard watched the exchange with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years reading alien body language. And the Ultramarines, for all their posthuman enormity, were readable. Disciplined shock, cautious fascination, the controlled energy of soldiers who had received orders that contradicted their instincts but trusted the chain of command enough to comply. Good soldiers, then, the best kind, and the most dangerous kind, depending on who held the chain. The transport that arrived 20 minutes later was a Thunderhawk, a gunship that operated on principles Shepard's Omni-tool categorized as theoretically impossible before giving up entirely and displaying a single question mark. The interior smelled of machine oil, sacred unguents, and the particular metallic sharpness of weapons clean to religious standards. Shepard sat between 2 Terminators in silence, running combat calculations out of habit. Escape probability, negligible. Threat level of escorts, extreme. Threat level of whoever waited at the destination, unknown, which was tactically worse than extreme. The gunship broke atmosphere and docked with a vessel that defied easy description, a strike cruiser the size of a small city, its hull covered in scripture and battle honors carved directly into the metal, and every surface a testament to 10,000 years of unbroken war. Even through the viewport, the scale of it rewrote Shepard's sense of proportion. The Alliance had warships. The Normandy had been beautiful. This was something else. This was a civilization that had looked at war and decided to make it eternal. They were escorted through corridors that felt like the nave of a cathedral that had learned to move through space, until the doors opened into a strategium that smelled of fresh parchment and old iron, and a figure turned from a hololith display that showed 100 simultaneous war zones, and the room got smaller simply because of how much space he occupied. Robut Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, Regent of the Imperium, looked at Shepard the way Shepard had once looked at the Prothean beacon, with the immediate, uncomfortable recognition that this changes everything. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. "We have a great deal to discuss, Commander." Shepard sat and noticed for the first time the empty throne at the far end of the strategium. Massive, ancient, deliberately unoccupied, draped in honors that belonged to no one living. "Whose seat is that?" Guilliman's expression shifted into something that might have been grief, or calculation, or both. "That," he said carefully, "is why you're here." The story of the Void Walkers chapter was told in absences. Guilliman laid it out with the clinical precision of a man who had learned to treat tragedy as logistics. Because in the Imperium, grief that wasn't weaponized was grief that got you killed. The Void Walkers had been created during the Second Founding, gene-seeded from ultramarine stock, gifted with a Primarch of their own, a being called Ethon, who had emerged from the same mysterious process that had produced Guilliman himself. Brilliant, adaptive, possessing a quality that no other Primarch shared, the ability to lead without demanding worship. Ethon had vanished 1100 years ago, not fallen to chaos, not slain in glorious battle. Simply gone, stepped into a dimensional anomaly during the siege of Vorthane Prime and never returned. The chapter had carried on, as imperial institutions always did, through inertia and inherited doctrine. But without a Primarch's guiding hand, the Void Walkers had slowly calcified. Their numbers dwindled, their strategic acumen narrowed. They were still formidable. 1,000 Space Marines were always formidable. But they were a blade that hadn't been properly sharpened in a millennium, and the seat remained empty. Because Void Walker tradition, encoded into their founding charter by Ethon himself, was absolute, the seat could only be claimed by one who arrived from beyond the known galaxy, bearing proof of wars fought against extinction itself. Shepard absorbed this in silence. Across 3 years of impossible choices, the skill most critical to survival had never been firepower or biotics. It had been knowing when a situation was being managed. This was being managed. "You found me within minutes of my arrival," Shepard said, "on a dead world, in an active war zone, with no augur signature to track. You want to explain that?" Guilliman had the grace not to pretend surprise at the deduction. "A Farseer of Craft World Eondin sent us coordinates 72 hours ago. She said something would fall from a scar in the void above Tharsis Secundus. She said it would be carrying the memory of a war against gods. The Reapers. Even here, across the dimensional barrier, the shadow of that war preceded him. And you just trusted Eldar intelligence?" "I trusted nothing," Guilliman said precisely. "I positioned assets. There is a difference." He moved to the empty throne, standing before it rather than approaching it, the way a man stands before something he respects enough not to touch. "The Void Walkers need what you appear to be, Commander. A leader without ideology. Someone who fights for the people standing beside them rather than the institution standing behind them." There it was, the real offer beneath the logistics. Shepard stood and walked to the throne. Up close, it was covered in carvings, not devotional scripture, but records, names, battles, world saved, species protected, a different kind of monument than anything else Shepard had seen in this cathedral civilization. Less about glory, more about cost. The biotic implants pulsed once, ragged, uncertain, and then steadied, as though the throne's proximity had given the interference something to push against. "I'm not a space marine," Shepard said. "No," Guilliman agreed. "You're something the Imperium doesn't have a category for. That may be exactly what the Void Walkers require." He paused, and for just a moment, the Primarch's political armor cracked enough to show something genuine underneath. And what the Imperium requires, whether it knows it or not. Shepard looked at the empty seat for a long time. "Tell me about the chapter," Shepard said finally. "All of it. The parts you didn't put in the official briefing." Guilliman almost smiled. The Mechanicus delegation arrived before dawn. 3 tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, summoned by Guilliman with the particular urgency reserved for situations that defied existing classification, which, in the Imperium's 10,000-year history, happened less often than one might expect, and more often than the official records acknowledged. They moved through the strategium in the distinctive half-glide of heavily augmented bodies, red robes whispering against the deck, mechadendrites coiling and uncoiling with the restless energy of creatures perpetually seeking something to measure. Magos Virdana Osek led them. She was old enough that the biological components of her face had been reduced to 2 pale eyes behind optical lenses and a mouth that opened only for binary cant or surgical questions. She looked at Shepard the way a collector looks at an artifact that shouldn't exist, with hunger poorly disguised as academic interest. "Remove the upper armor plating," she said. Not a request. "Good morning to you too," Shepard replied, and did it anyway. What followed was 3 hours of the most thorough and uncomfortable examination Shepard had survived outside of the Lazarus Project itself. Osek's mechadendrites mapped every centimeter of the Cerberus cybernetics with instruments that hummed at frequencies that made the back teeth ache. She cataloged the biotic implants, the L5X nodes embedded along the spine, the cranial interface, the mass effect field generators threaded through muscle tissue. With escalating agitation that manifested as increasingly rapid binary murmuring between herself and her acolytes. The problem, as Shepard gradually understood from context, was that none of it matched anything. The Imperium's technology was ancient and reverential. The standard template constructs that governed all sanctioned machinery were treated as sacred texts, deviation from which bordered on heresy. Osek had spent 6 centuries cataloging every known variation of human augmentation across 1,000,000 worlds. Shepard's cybernetics fit none of her categories. They were human in origin, unmistakably, molecularly human, but constructed on principles that assumed technological progression the Imperium had deliberately, systematically prevented for 10,000 years. "These neural interfaces," Osek said, her voice carrying the particular flatness of someone suppressing genuine emotion, "operate through quantum entanglement pathways. The mathematics are..." She stopped, started again. "They should not function. The Omnissiah's doctrine does not permit..." Another stop. Her optical lenses refocused. "They function." "Generally, yes," Shepard agreed. "The biotic implants generate mass effect fields through dark energy manipulation." This came out almost accusatory. "Dark energy. You are manipulating dark energy through biological interface." "Since I was 18, the binary murmuring reached a pitch that suggested theological crisis. One of the acolytes dropped a calibration instrument. Shepard watched the Magos wrestle with the collision between doctrine and evidence, a battle Shepard recognized, having watched it play out across a dozen species during the Reaper War. The moment when what you believed and what you observed refused to occupy the same space. Some people chose belief. The good ones chose observation. Osek chose observation. "You are," she said finally, with the gravity of someone filing a report that would overturn centuries of scholarship, outside the standard template construct, entirely. A pause that carried the weight of genuine wonder. This has not happened in recorded Mechanicus history. "Does that mean you're done poking me?" "Absolutely not." For the first time, something that might have been enthusiasm animated her augmented features. "It means we have only just begun." She turned to her acolytes with renewed urgency. "Prepare the deep scan array, alert Forge Master Threnody, and someone retrieve that calibration instrument. We will need every tool we possess and likely invent several new ones." Shepard looked at the ceiling and thought, not for the first time, about how every new galaxy came with its own version of Cerberus scientists who couldn't decide whether you were a person or a project. At least this time, the armor was going back on afterward. The Void Walkers did not kneel. This was, Shepard would later reflect, the most honest thing about them. 300 assembled warriors in the strike cruiser's training decks. The remainder scattered across active deployments on 6 worlds, standing in parade formation with the particular stillness of men who had learned restraint, not from doctrine, but from disappointment. They had watched leaders come and go. Guilliman's appointees, inquisitorial observers, decorated chapter masters who arrived with mandates and left with casualties. The Void Walkers had outlasted every attempt to define them from the outside. They studied Shepard the way soldiers study terrain, looking for weaknesses, looking for the angle that explained why this particular stranger deserved the empty seat that Ethon had left behind. The Captain Aldrich Vorn spoke for them. He was the oldest active Void Walker. 230 years of continuous service compressed into a frame that still moved like something younger and angrier. His face was a topographic map of decisions made under fire, and his eyes held the particular quality Shepard had seen in Admiral Hackett, the look of a man who had sent people to die so many times that he'd stopped flinching and started accounting. "We don't need a symbol," Vorn said. His voice carried across the training deck without effort. "We've had symbols. They look impressive until the first siege, and then they become liabilities we have to protect instead of assets we can deploy." He stopped 3 meters from Shepard. "What we need is someone who can tell me something I don't already know about how to win a war." Shepard recognized the test beneath the speech. Vorn wasn't looking for humility or authority. He was looking for competence, the real kind, demonstrated rather than declared. "Pull up your last 3 engagements," Shepard said. "Tactical data, casualty reports, opposition force composition." Vorn's eyes narrowed fractionally. He nodded once. The hololith at the deck's center, populated with battle data. Shepard moved to it without ceremony, reading the information with the speed of someone who had learned to process tactical feeds mid-firefight. 3 engagements, 2 victories, 1 tactical withdrawal. The victories were expensive. The withdrawal was clean. Cleaner than the victories, actually, which said something important about where Vorn's real talent lived. "Your casualty ratios in the first engagement are wrong," Shepard said. Silence. "Not the numbers, the distribution. You're losing disproportionately on left flank advances. Your veterans are compensating instinctively, which means your younger warriors are carrying weight they haven't been properly prepared for. Shepard traced the holographic terrain. Whoever is commanding your third squad on left flank advances is good enough to make the problem invisible until you count the bodies afterward. The silence changed texture, from skeptical to attentive. "Sergeant Kalen," Vorn said quietly. "Third squad. He needs to be teaching, not leading. His instinct is to solve problems himself rather than build the capacity around him to solve them independently." Shepard looked up from the hololith. "You have the same instinct, Captain. It's why your withdrawal was cleaner than your victories. You know how to preserve what matters. You're less certain about how to grow it." Vorn stared for a long moment. Then he turned to the assembled warriors. "Someone get the commander a bolter," he said. "Let's see if the analysis survives contact with practical application." Around the deck, 300 Space Marines shifted their weight, and the quality of their attention changed from evaluation to something that looked, cautiously, like interest. Shepard caught the bolter one-handed, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and felt the biotic implants stabilize for the first time since arrival, as though the body recognized this, at least. The weight of a weapon, the clarity of a test. "Lead the way, Captain." The Farseer came at midnight, not through the docking bay, not through any entrance the Void Walker sensors registered or their sentinels observed. One moment, the meditation chamber adjacent to Shepard's assigned quarters was empty. The next, she was simply there, seated cross-legged on the floor with the particular patience of someone who had been waiting for this conversation across several decades and found the moment only mildly satisfying relative to the anticipation. She was tall, even seated. Her armor was the deep blue-green of deep ocean water, wraithbone curves etched with script too fine for human eyes to resolve without magnification. Her face was angular, ageless in the way that suggested not youth, but the deliberate transcendence of it. Her eyes were the color of dying stars, not metaphorically, literally. Something moved behind them that had nothing to do with reflected light. Shepard stood in the doorway with the Carnifex already drawn and made the same tactical calculation as on Tharsis Secundus. "Don't shoot first." "You sent Gilliman the coordinates," Shepard said. "I sent Gilliman the coordinates," the Farseer confirmed. Her low Gothic was flawless and faintly archaic, like a language learned from recordings rather than conversation. "My name is Silthara of Craftworld Eondon. I have been watching the scar your arrival tore in reality for 11 years before you fell through it." Shepard crossed the room and sat opposite her, holstering the Carnifex. 11 years. You knew I was coming before I did. We knew something was coming. The precise nature of you was..." A pause that carried genuine intellectual discomfort. "Unclear. Our seers saw a being that had fought gods and survived. We assumed chaos. We prepared for chaos." The dying star eyes focused with uncomfortable precision. "You are considerably more disorienting than chaos. I'll take that as a compliment. It was an observation." Silthara's hands, folded in her lap, unfolded slightly, a small gesture that Shepard read as the Eldar equivalent of leaning forward. The Void Walker's founding charter was not written by Ethon, Commander. It was written for you. Ethon understood what the charter meant before he disappeared. He told his most trusted sergeant that the seat would one day be claimed by someone who remembered what humanity was supposed to become, rather than what it had settled for being. The words landed with the particular weight of information that recontextualizes everything preceding it. Shepard had spent the last 72 hours treating the Primarch's seat as a political circumstance, a resource to be evaluated, a commitment to be measured against alternatives. This reframed it as something older and more deliberate. You're telling me this was engineered across 1,000 years? Across 11,000 years, Silthera corrected. Aethon did not emerge naturally from the Primarch-making process. He was introduced into it by Eldar hands at the request of a human soul we had preserved in the Infinity Circuit since the Dark Age of technology. A soul that had seen your coming in its final moments and asked us, across the vast distance of dying, that to prepare a place. Shepard went very still. Who was the soul? Silthara reached into her armor and produced a wraithbone fragment no larger than a palm. Translucent, faintly luminous, carved with a single symbol that Shepard recognized with a sudden vertigo of seeing something impossibly familiar in an impossible place. The N7 insignia. Someone who came before you, Silthara said quietly. Someone who also fell through the void and found no seat waiting. They spent their life ensuring you would not face the same absence. She placed the fragment on the floor between them. The trap I mentioned to Guilliman's intelligence assets is real, but it was not set against you, Commander. It was set for you, by someone who loved humanity enough to architect its salvation across 10 millennia. The biotic implants pulsed, not with interference this time, with something that felt uncomfortably like recognition. The word-bearers arrived with gifts. 3 strike vessels dropped from the warp above the Voidwalker's position, with the theatrical precision of an entrance rehearsed for maximum psychological impact, which, Shepard had learned, was standard operating procedure for Chaos Space Marines who had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of making their enemies feel cosmically outmatched before the first shot was fired. The vessels were the color of dried blood, their hulls covered in scripture that writhed when observed directly, the words rearranging themselves into whatever the reader feared most. Shepard's HUD translated fragments before the Omni-Tool's language matrix decided it would rather not. The communication came through on a frequency that shouldn't have been able to penetrate the strike cruiser's Vox shielding, but did, because the word-bearers had spent millennia learning that faith, sufficiently concentrated, ignored most physical laws. The voice that emerged was beautiful in the way that deep water is beautiful. Something wrong lived beneath the surface of it. Commander Shepard, a pause calibrated for effect. We know what you are, we know what you've lost, and we know what you want. Vorn was already at Shepard's shoulder, bolter raised toward the viewport, as though ceramite rounds could reach the vessels outside. Give the order, he said quietly. We engage immediately. Wait, Shepard said. Vorn's jaw tightened. He waited. The voice continued. The crucible's firing scattered more than your body across dimensional space, Commander. Your crew, fragments of them, their final moments, their last transmissions, exist in the warp. Preserved. Accessible. Another pause. Liara, Garrus, Tali, we can show you where they are. We can show you how to reach them. The biotic implants went completely silent. Every ambient sound in the strategium seemed to follow. Shepard had faced this architecture of temptation before. The Illusive Man had built his entire methodology around it. Find the thing someone loves most. Make its return contingent on compliance. The offer felt real because the best traps always did. And this one was constructed with enough specific detail, names, relationships, the precise shape of grief, to suggest genuine intelligence rather than fabricated bait, which made it more dangerous, not less. "What's the price?" Shepard asked. "The seat," the voice said simply. "Decline the Primarch's chair. Walk away from the Void Walkers. Leave the Imperium's newest variable unresolved. That is all. A small thing, measured against reunion. Small. The word did the work it was designed to do, made the cost sound proportionate to the reward, obscured the actual calculus. If Shepard declined the seat, the Void Walkers remained leaderless. The trap Silthera had described, 11,000 years in the making, collapsed. Whatever Ethon and the preserved N7 soul had built across millennia would dissolve for want of the variable they'd constructed it around. A small thing, only 10,000 years of preparation and 1,000,000 lives downstream. Shepard opened the Vox channel fully. "I've heard this offer before," Shepard said. "Different voices, different currency, same architecture. You find the wound and you press on it, and you call the infection a cure." A pause. "My crew died for something. Dishonoring that by trading it for comfort would be the worst possible memorial I could give them." Silence from the word-bearer's vessels. "Additionally," Shepard continued, turning to Vorn, "I'm going to need everything you have on word-bearer tactical doctrine, specifically their summoning formations and their response patterns to biotic-enhanced close assault." Vorn looked at the viewport, then at Shepard, then back at the viewport. "You're going to attack them." "We're going to attack them," Shepard corrected. "Get Sergeant Kalen on left flank. Tell him he's teaching today, not leading." The biotic implants surged back online, stable, clear, furious. "Let's show them what the seat looks like occupied." The High Lords moved quietly, as they always did. Not with bolters or battle barges. That was the Imperium's public language, the grammar of force it spoke openly and without apology. The High Lords of Terra operated in a different register entirely. They moved through intermediaries and implications, through resource allocation and strategic reassignment, through the 10,000 small mechanisms of institutional power that didn't appear in any official record but shaped reality as thoroughly as any orbital bombardment. Shepard learned about the assassination order from Silthera. The Farseer materialized in the Strategium 3 hours after the word-bearer's vessels retreated, damaged but intact, having declined to press an engagement against a Primarch seat claimant, whose biotic assault had collapsed 2 summoning circles and personally executed a Dark Apostle mid-sermon. She carried the intelligence with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone reporting weather conditions. "The High Lords have dispatched an execution fleet," she said, "designating the Void Walkers as a chapter under censure. The official charge is harboring an unclassified Xenos-adjacent entity in violation of the decree passive. She paused. The unofficial charge is that you exist outside their control and have demonstrated a disturbing capacity to inspire loyalty in forces they consider their instruments. Vorn, who had been cleaning his bolter with the focused attention of a man processing difficult information through familiar ritual, it set it down very carefully. An execution fleet, he said, against us. 3 inquisitorial black ships and a Grey Knight strike force, Silthera confirmed. Estimated arrival, 48 hours. The strategium went quiet in the particular way of rooms where everyone is performing rapid threat assessment simultaneously. Shepard watched the Void Walker's senior staff cycle through the stages. Disbelief, fury, calculation, with the speed of warriors who had learned that emotional processing was a luxury best conducted after the immediate crisis. Options, Shepard said. What followed was the most honest strategic session Shepard had participated in since the war councils before the final push on Earth, because these warriors had nothing left to protect except the truth of their situation. No political performance, no institutional face-saving, just the clean arithmetic of survival. Running was possible, but terminal. A chapter under censure that fled became a chapter excommunicate, hunted across every world the Imperium touched. Surrendering was possible, but naive. The High Lords hadn't dispatched Grey Knights to conduct an investigation. They'd dispatched them to conduct a termination. Fighting was possible, but Pyrrhic. Even a full-strength Void Walker's engagement against Grey Knights would leave them too depleted to matter afterward. There's a 4th option, Shepard said. Every head in the room turned. We don't fight the execution fleet. We make fighting us politically impossible. Shepard moved to the hololith, pulling up Imperial star charts with the Omni Tools interface, a gesture that still produced visible discomfort in Ossek's attending acolyte, who had joined the meeting uninvited and showed no signs of leaving. The High Lords moved against us because we're an unknown variable, something they can't categorize, can't control, can't predict. Shepard highlighted 3 systems on the chart, each one flagged in Imperial records as critical strategic nodes currently under severe threat. We solved their problems for them, publicly, on a scale that makes eliminating us cost more than tolerating us. A pause. In 48 hours, we need to do something so unambiguously valuable to the Imperium's survival that the execution order becomes politically toxic to execute. Vorn leaned over the hololith, studying the highlighted systems. His expression moved through skepticism into something more complicated. Helvara Prime, he said slowly. The Tau have been pushing their 3rd sphere expansion into that system for 8 months. The local garrison is at 40% strength. And a Void Walker's intervention, led by a commander who just turned back a Word-Bearer's assault, would be recorded as a chapter acting in the Imperium's defense, Shepard said. Not as a rogue element, not as an unclassified threat, as an asset. You're going to make yourself too expensive to kill, Vorn said. I learned it from the best, Shepard said, thinking of a blue-skinned ambassador who had once navigated 17 competing political factions into a single coordinated fleet through sheer diplomatic audacity. Get the chapter ready. We leave in 2 hours. The High Lords moved quietly, as they always did, not with bolters or battle barges. That was the Imperium's public language, the grammar of force it spoke openly and without apology. The High Lords of Terra operated in a different register entirely. They moved through intermediaries and implications, through resource allocation and strategic reassignment, through the 10,000 small mechanisms of institutional power that didn't appear in any official record but shaped reality as thoroughly as any orbital bombardment. Shepard learned about the assassination order from Silthera. The Farseer materialized in the Strategium 3 hours after the Word-bearer's vessels retreated, damaged but intact, having declined to press an engagement against a Primarch seat claimant, whose biotic assault had collapsed 2 summoning circles and personally executed a Dark Apostle mid-sermon. She carried the intelligence with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone reporting weather conditions. "The High Lords have dispatched an execution fleet," she said, "designating the Void Walkers as a chapter under censure. The official charge is harboring an unclassified Xenos-adjacent entity in violation of the decree passive." She paused. "The unofficial charge is that you exist outside their control and have demonstrated a disturbing capacity to inspire loyalty in forces they consider their instruments." Vorn, who had been cleaning his bolter with the focused attention of a man processing difficult information through familiar ritual, it set it down very carefully. "An execution fleet," he said, "against us. 3 inquisitorial black ships and a Grey Knight strike force," Silthera confirmed. "Estimated arrival, 48 hours." The Strategium went quiet in the particular way of rooms where everyone is performing rapid threat assessment simultaneously. Shepard watched the Void Walker's senior staff cycle through the stages: disbelief, fury, calculation, with the speed of warriors who had learned that emotional processing was a luxury best conducted after the immediate crisis. "Options," Shepard said. What followed was the most honest strategic session Shepard had participated in since the War Councils before the final push on Earth, because these warriors had nothing left to protect except the truth of their situation. No political performance, no institutional face-saving, just the clean arithmetic of survival. Running was possible, but terminal. A chapter under censure that fled became a chapter excommunicate, hunted across every world the Imperium touched. Surrendering was possible, but naive. The High Lords hadn't dispatched Grey Knights to conduct an investigation. They'd dispatched them to conduct a termination. Fighting was possible, but Pyrrhic. Even a full-strength Void Walker's engagement against Grey Knights would leave them too depleted to matter afterward. "There's a 4th option," Shepard said. Every head in the room turned. "We don't fight the execution fleet. We make fighting us politically impossible." Shepard moved to the hololith, pulling up Imperial star charts with the Omni Tools interface, a gesture that still produced visible discomfort in Ossek's attending acolyte, who had joined the meeting uninvited and showed no signs of leaving. "The High Lords moved against us because we're an unknown variable, something they can't categorize, can't control, can't predict." Shepard highlighted 3 systems on the chart, each one flagged in Imperial records as critical strategic nodes currently under severe threat. "We solved their problems for them, publicly, on a scale that makes eliminating us cost more than tolerating us. A pause. In 48 hours, we need to do something so unambiguously valuable to the Imperium's survival that the execution order becomes politically toxic to execute. Vorn leaned over the hololith, studying the highlighted systems. His expression moved through skepticism into something more complicated. "Helvara Prime," he said slowly. "The Tau have been pushing their third sphere expansion into that system for 8 months. The local garrison is at 40% strength. And a Void Walker's intervention, led by a commander who just turned back a Word-bearer's assault, would be recorded as a chapter acting in the Imperium's defense," Shepard said. "Not as a rogue element, not as an unclassified threat, as an asset." "You're going to make yourself too expensive to kill," Vorn said. "I learned it from the best," Shepard said, thinking of a blue-skinned ambassador who had once navigated 17 competing political factions into a single coordinated fleet through sheer diplomatic audacity. "Get the chapter ready. We leave in 2 hours." Helvara Prime was dying by degrees. The Tau's third sphere expansion had the particular patience of a civilization that had learned to treat war as an extended philosophical argument. Each position taken not with brute force, but with the accumulated pressure of superior logistics, coordinated fire disciplines, and the relentless ideological gravity of the greater good. The Imperial garrison had held for 8 months through sheer obstinate courage, the kind that the Astra Militarum produced in extraordinary quantities, precisely because it asked its soldiers to substitute courage for resources so routinely that the substitution had become doctrine. The Void Walkers dropped from orbit without announcement. Shepard had spent the 2-hour transit studying every available record on Tau military doctrine, firecast formations, battlesuit deployment patterns, commander-class strategic behavior, and found, with the particular satisfaction of a problem yielding to sufficient attention, that the Tau were not so different from enemies faced before. Different aesthetics, different ideology, different technology. The same fundamental architecture, a command structure that derived its effectiveness from coordination, and therefore carried coordination's essential vulnerability. Disrupt the coordination, dissolve the effectiveness. 3 simultaneous insertions, Shepard told the assembled squad leaders in the drop bay, the Thunderhawk shuddering around them as they hit atmosphere. First and second companies hit the battlesuit staging ground here. The Omni tool projected the coordinates, not to destroy the suits, to force their pilots to reactive engagement rather than coordinated advance. Third company secures the garrison's eastern flank and gets those soldiers back into the fight. They've been holding for 8 months. They deserve to see the line move forward. Vorn, standing at Shepard's left, added nothing. He had spent the transit watching Shepard work with the expression of a man updating a long-held assessment. "And you?" asked Sergeant Kalen, who had accepted his teaching assignment with the grace of someone who understood, belatedly, that it was a promotion rather than a reassignment. "I'm going to have a conversation with their commander," Shepard said. The drop was controlled chaos rendered beautiful by precision. The Void Walkers hitting 3 coordinates within 11 seconds of each other, its ceramite boots crashing into Helvara Prime's red soil, while Tau pulse fire streaked overhead in elegant, lethal geometry. Shepard came down in the center of the battlesuit staging ground, with a biotic charge that hit like a miniature singularity, scattering XV-8 crisis suits like thrown toys and buying 30 seconds of pure confusion. 30 seconds was enough. The Tau commander's name, intercepted from tactical Vox, was Shaz-O Viorla Kais, a designation that translated roughly as one who strikes with perfect clarity. He was good. Shepard could see it in the speed of his recovery, the way his forces reorganized around the disruption rather than collapsing under it, the precise economical movements of a military mind that had never encountered a problem it couldn't reframe as an opportunity. Shepard put a biotic pull on his battlesuit at 400 meters, cracking the targeting array and dragging him out of formation, and then walked toward him through pulse fire with the focused calm of someone who had once walked toward a reaper, knowing it could kill them, and decided that the walking mattered more than the odds. The battlesuit's external speakers activated. "You are not Imperial," Kais said, observation rather than accusation. "No," Shepard agreed, stopping 20 meters away while the battle raged on 3 fronts around them. "I'm not." "Then why are you here?" Shepard looked at the garrison's eastern flank, where 3rd Company had just broken through to the Imperial soldiers who had been holding the line for 8 months. Watching those exhausted, hollow-eyed guardsmen straighten as the Void Walker's cobalt blue armor came through the smoke, watching something that had nearly gone out in them catch and hold. "Because they needed someone to show up," Shepard said. "That's usually enough reason." Kais was silent for 3 seconds. In a Tau commander, Shepard had learned, 3 seconds of silence meant genuine recalibration. "You would make a remarkable addition to the greater good," he said finally. "I get that a lot," Shepard replied, and hit him with a biotic throw that put the battlesuit through a prefabricated wall, non-lethally, but conclusively. "Tell your forces to withdraw. No more dying today. Not yours, not theirs." The battle lasted 43 more minutes. When it ended, the Tau were withdrawing in good order, and the Imperial garrison was holding a line that had moved forward for the first time in 8 months. Shepard stood in the red dust of Helvara Prime while the Void Walkers consolidated their position, watching the Thunderhawks circle overhead, and felt the Omni tool ping with an incoming transmission. It was from Terra, Inquisitorial Seal. The execution fleet had been recalled. Vorn appeared at Shepard's shoulder, reading the transmission over the commander's arm with the unself-conscious practicality of a man who had decided that personal space was a resource to be allocated strategically. "It worked," he said. Not surprised. Something better than surprised. Confirmed. "It worked this time," Shepard said. "Terra doesn't forget. They've just decided we're more useful alive." A pause, watching the dust settle across the battlefield. "That's a temporary condition. We need to make it permanent." Vorn nodded slowly. Then, with the deliberate weight of a man who had spent 200 years deciding what things were worth, he took a knee in the red soil of Helvara Prime. Behind him, without order or signal, 300 Void Walkers followed. The throne room of the Void Walkers' fortress monastery had not witnessed a Primarch's ascension in 1100 years. It showed. The ceremonial banners had been cleaned hastily, their colors still bright beneath decades of accumulated dust. The honor guard stood in formation that was slightly too rigid, the particular stiffness of warriors performing a ritual they had rehearsed from written records rather than living memory. The fortress itself, a megalithic structure carved into the bones of a dead moon orbiting a world that had no name in imperial records, seemed to hold its breath in the particular way of ancient things that had waited long enough to recognize the end of waiting. Silthara stood at the chamber's edge, neither inside nor outside, occupying the threshold with the ease of someone accustomed to existing between defined spaces. Osek attended with 3 acolytes and equipment that was ostensibly for biometric recording, but was transparently for satisfying an obsession that had not diminished since the initial examination. Guilliman was present via hololith, a concession to political reality. His physical presence at an unsanctioned Primarch Ascension being something the High Lords would have weaponized before the ceremony concluded. Vorn carried the Primarch's seal on a cushion that had been cleaned so aggressively it had lost a layer of material. Shepard stood before the throne in N7 armor that had been repaired, recalibrated, and quietly engraved along the left pauldron, by whose hand no one admitted, with the names of the dead: Normandy crew, companions, in every soul that the Reaper War had taken, a memorial carried into a new war in a new galaxy, because some debts don't expire at dimensional boundaries. The charter requires an oath, Vorn said. His voice was steady in the way that things are steady when they are being held steady by conscious effort. To the Emperor, to the Imperium, to the chapter. Shepard looked at the throne, at the wraithbone fragment on its arm, placed there by Silthara before the ceremony, the N7 insignia catching the chamber's light. At the 300 warriors in formation below who had knelt in red dust on Helvara Prime, not because doctrine demanded it, but because something in them had recognized something in Shepard that doctrine had never been able to produce. "I'll swear to the chapter," Shepard said. "Now to every warrior in this room and everyone deployed across 6 worlds who held the line while the seat was empty. I'll swear to the people on every world this chapter protects. The ones who don't have ceramite armor and gene-enhanced physiology, who survive on courage and stubbornness alone." A pause. "I won't swear to an institution that dispatched an execution fleet against its own people because they made an inconvenient choice. That's not faith. That's control wearing faith's clothing." The chamber held its breath. Vorn looked at Shepard for a long moment. Then he looked at the assembled Void Walkers. Then he did something that 1100 years of chapter history contained no precedent for. He set the ceremonial cushion aside and extended the Primarch's seal directly, hand to hand, the way soldiers pass critical equipment in the field. "Then swear to us," he said simply. "That's always been enough." Shepard took the seal. The biotic implants, fully stable for the first time since arrival, pulsed once, clean and certain. The interference finally resolved into something that felt less like disruption and more like integration. The warp-saturated atmosphere of the 41st Millennium, pressing against a consciousness forged in a different universe, and finding, to mutual surprise, that the fit was imperfect but genuine. Genuine was enough. It had always been enough. Across the chamber, 300 Void Walkers brought their right fists to their chests in unison. Not the Imperial salute, which belonged to a hierarchy that had tried to kill them 48 hours ago, but something older and simpler. The gesture of soldiers acknowledging a commander they had chosen rather than been assigned. Silthera watched from the threshold with the expression of someone witnessing the completion of an 11,000-year calculation. She touched the doorframe once, a private gesture meant for no one present, and whispered something in Eldar that the chamber's audio pickups were too distant to capture. Later, when Osek's acolyte reviewed the recording and ran the fragment through 17 translation matrices, the closest rendering was, "Finally." He would have been so pleased. Guilliman's hololith flickered. The Primarch of the Ultramarines, regent of the Imperium, looked at the new occupant of the Voidwalker's seat with an expression that contained, in careful measure, relief and warning in equal proportion. "The High Lords will not accept this indefinitely," he said. "I know," Shepard said, seated now, the throne's ancient carvings pressing through N7 plating. All those names, all that cost, all that recorded weight of what it meant to protect rather than rule. "Neither will I accept their version of the Imperium indefinitely." A pause. "That's probably going to be a problem for everyone." "Yes," Guilliman agreed. And something in the Primarch's voice suggested that he found this, against all political wisdom, quietly encouraging. "It probably will be." The hololith died. The chamber breathed again. Shepard looked at Vorn, who was already pulling up tactical displays with the focused energy of a man who had spent 2 centuries waiting for someone to tell him the mission wasn't over. 6 active deployments, Shepard said. Walk me through them. Start with the worst one." Vorn almost smiled. "They're all the worst one." "Good," Shepard said. "I work better that way." In the end, the Imperium did not know what to make of Commander Shepard. The High Lords filed 17 formal objections to the Voidwalker's new Primarch seat occupant over the following year. Each one was answered not with defiance, but with results. Worlds held, sieges broken, alliances forged with Xenos factions that had no business negotiating with Imperial forces, but did anyway, because the being across the table wasn't quite Imperial and carried themselves like someone who had done this before across a very different galaxy. Silthara visited twice more. Each time she stayed longer and explained less, which Shepard had learned to interpret as the Eldar equivalent of trust. Osek never stopped running tests. Shepard stopped pretending to mind. Its Vorn became what he had always been suited to be. Not a commander carrying a burden alone, but a first officer carrying it alongside someone who understood that leadership was a shared weight, or it was tyranny with better intentions. The Wraithbone fragment stayed on the throne's arm, a reminder from someone who had fallen through the same void and found no seat waiting, who had spent their remaining years ensuring the next one wouldn't face the same absence. Shepard never learned their name. It seemed important, somehow, to leave that mystery intact. Some debts are honored best by carrying them forward rather than resolving them. The Imperium remained broken and magnificent and brutal and worth fighting for. Not because its institutions deserved it, but because its people did. That distinction, Shepard had decided, was everything. It was enough to build on. It would have to be. The Emperor protects. More stories await.